last century we had 2 massive world wars, 3 if you count the Cold War. I think it's unlikely that we will never have another world war again.
Or if we have another one, it'll be the last.
Yeah, it just could be radioactive rubble.
Over in Russia, Russian President Vladimir Putin is threatening to target America with nuclear weapons. He made the remarks in his annual speech to both houses of the Russian parliament today.
Putin says that he would not make the first move, but that he'd have no choice if the U.S. puts its own nuclear missiles in Europe. Tensions have been high after the Trump administration's decision to withdraw from the Cold War-era nuclear treaty before that announcement.
The Trump administration said today it's pulling out of a nuclear arms control treaty that dates back to the Cold War.
The treaty was signed in 1987 by President Ronald Reagan and Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev. It bans the U.S. and Soviet Union from possessing, producing, and test flying ground-launched missiles with a range of around 300 to 3,400 miles.
When the Russians put it on display, it looks much like any other missile. But this is the weapon which threatens to unravel decades of nuclear arms control. It is a low-flying cruise missile, which U.S. intelligence says violates the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, INF for short. Today, the Trump administration announced that if Russia won't abide by the treaty, neither will the U.S.
We can't be put at the disadvantage of going by a treaty, limiting what we do when somebody else doesn't go by that treaty.
Russia, under Vladimir Putin, in what the U.S. believes is an attempt to intimidate the NATO allies, has secretly fielded about 100 of these new missiles, despite what Secretary of State Pompeo said were repeated protests going back to the Obama administration.
We have raised Russia's noncompliance with Russian officials, including at the highest levels of government, more than 30 times. Yet Russia continues to deny that its missile system is noncompliant and violates the treaty.
The U.S. must now decide how to respond, which it could do by taking existing sea-launched cruise missiles and basing them on land.
Russia is firing back at President Trump's new threat to pull out of a landmark nuclear weapons treaty. One Russian official warns breaking the pact would be a very dangerous step.
The U.S. has declared Russia in violation of the treaty by developing prohibited weapons. Russia denies that charge and has accused the U.S. of breaching the agreement.
U.S. defense officials say this is the real deal. Russia test firing its new high-speed hypersonic missile, a missile that the U.S. military currently cannot defend against. Russian President Vladimir Putin pulling no punches on his intent.
The new avant-garde missile system is invincible against today's and future air and missile defense systems of the potential enemy. This is a big success and a great achievement.
If the weapons work as advertised, there is no current defense against them.
The Russian missile has captured the attention of Patrick Shanahan. Shanahan warns the U.S. needs to be able to detect the fast-flying missile much further away than current radar systems can handle. The U.S. has to detect it thousands, not hundreds of miles away because of its high-speed approach. The Pentagon may spend more than $1 billion trying to develop and field its own capabilities.
We're going to need a different set of sensors in order to see the hypersonic threats. Our adversaries know that.
Both India and Pakistan have more than 100 nuclear weapons each, far more than enough to create a nuclear winter which will kill us all. They have fought 3 wars since 1947, and India is developing a nuclear submarine fleet so it can fire its missiles from anywhere.
Even a war between India and Pakistan, 2 of the smallest nuclear powers, with only a few hundred weapons of about the size of the Hiroshima bomb, we might die as unintended consequences. My colleagues calculated the spread of smoke after a war between India and Pakistan. It only takes about 2 weeks for the smoke to cover the entire Earth, and it would rise to altitudes between 20 and 50 miles above the surface. At those altitudes, it never rains. The smoke would stay there for years. This farmer maybe in Europe or in the United States, but many thousands of miles from Pakistan and India, is looking at the smoky sky above him and down at the crops that have died in his field from lack of light and cold temperatures. It's estimated that in a war between India and Pakistan, that we would lose 10 to 40% of the yields of corn, wheat, and rice for years afterward because of the bad weather. The entire world only has enough food to feed the population for 60 days unless agriculture produces more food. It's estimated that 1 to 2 billion people would die after a war between India and Pakistan of starvation.
The escalating military tensions between the U.S. and Russia as Pentagon officials game out a response to Russian aggression in Europe. Vladimir Putin is now making some serious moves in the Caribbean.
Putin is on America's doorstep with nuclear-capable bombers that can fly at twice the speed of sound. It's a bold move right out of the Cold War as the Russian president tries to establish a military foothold near American shores. A Russian bomber with an impressive wingspan touches down at America's doorstep. Two of these bombers, nicknamed Blackjacks, are in Venezuela tonight. Vladimir Putin has deployed these warplanes along with two support aircraft to conduct exercises over the Caribbean with Venezuelan forces. A worrisome development for Washington, considering the capability of the Russian bombers, which can fly twice the speed of sound.
This bomber was designed to do both high-altitude and low-altitude penetration of airspace with nuclear weapons, to deliver nuclear weapons on target. This aircraft was designed to be an offensive-capable weapon to get into our airspace during the Cold War.
Analysts say Putin is sending an unmistakable signal to the United States tonight.
He's clearly trying to send a message to the United States that he can play in our backyard and that Russia maintains significant military capabilities.
Putin has made it very clear through his actions and through his commentary that he intends to reestablish Russia to the level of influence of the Soviet Union.
Meanwhile, tensions are extremely high tonight between two nuclear powers. Not here and the U.S. World leaders are urging Pakistan and India to take some deep breaths after 2 days of the most intense conflict between the two countries in 20 years.
Pakistan says it has shot down 2 Indian aircraft, which it claims were over Pakistani airspace. The Pakistani military also says its warplanes carried out airstrikes inside India.
Tensions are high between India and Pakistan as both countries order airstrikes against each other. Both countries have nuclear weapons. Pakistan says it shot down 2 Indian warplanes and captured one of their pilots.
And after a full-scale nuclear war, temperatures would plunge below ice age conditions. We would be in a nuclear winter. No crops would grow. It's estimated that 90% of the population of the planet would starve to death, and civilization would be destroyed. And no one would be safe. Not those in countries with no nuclear weapons, not those in countries that didn't participate in the war, and not those on the other side of the planet from where the explosions occurred. No one would be safe.
Even small exchanges could be absolutely devastating. You're going to have first the destruction effects, you'll have fallout, you may have some climatic effects that spread.
For his part, Robach has modeled a hypothetical worst-case scenario, which suggests that widely dispersed smoke from a small regional nuclear conflict could cause cooling of several degrees across parts of the world.
It would be enough to have a huge impact on agricultural production. The world would have much less food. So you can imagine these political instabilities developing, and war and terrible famine as a result of a small nuclear war on the other side of the world.